the conflicts that are political, conflicts that are ideological, conflicts that are not so much conflict, let's just say differences that are fiqh related. Conflicts that are political started with fighting over the Khilafah between Ali and Muawiyah, and from that stems the Khawarij and the beginning of Shia, and the rest is basically what is to become Ahl Sunnah. Although that category, those distinctions were not as the Khawarij were sort of quite distinct, but the distinction between Shia and Sunnah at that time was extremely blurred. It's not as sharp as you think it was. It needed multiple generations and a lot of conflict to get solidified and clearly delineated and separated. But what happened with that conflict, mainly from an epistemological standpoint, what happened with that conflict is there was a form of dictatorship, basically. I mean, the Umayyad Empire and the Abbasi Empire after that, everything after that. I mean, not just those two. They ruled by the system of kings, basically, and that source of power will be very much protected from criticism, and because it's protected, or people could not criticize, that puts some epistemologic pressure. The main manifestation of that epistemologic pressure, we see perpetuation of the political theory of the time, accentuation of the hadith that supposedly support that political theory, and complete lack of development of the politics that are supposed to be developed based on the guidance of the Quran. So you start to see some dislocation, partial dislocation of the Quran from life. It's the beginning of the dislocation of the Quran from life, because not everything in the Quran can be done because the system is what it is. Then the ideological conflicts came. The ideological conflicts pretty much started with the fact that when the state expanded so much and so many different people, different ideologies, different ethnicities, different religions came into the realm of the Muslim state, and they didn't know Arabic very well. They had some problems with the verses of the Quran, such as if Allah has a face, or if Allah has a hand, or if Allah has a foot, or if Allah has a side, jambillah. I mean, obviously, to an Arabic-speaking person, he would not even stop at those verses. I mean, they do not compromise our understanding of the fact that Allah laysa kamithlihi shay, nothing is like Him, and He is transcendent to all of those humanistic descriptions. And to an Arabic-speaking, they intuitively understand these verses as just an approximation to convey a meaning. But to non-Arabic speaking, especially fresh to Islam, or even they weren't Muslims, but they were under the realm of Islam, and they were, on some level adversarial, they would try to stir up trouble for it. And some people on the other side, like the Muslims, they felt the need to counteract their arguments, to try that doesn't mean he has a hand, does not mean he has a leg. And then you had schools within the ideology world to explain that have different positions. But a lot of those schools, regardless of the position, of course there's the traditional school which relied heavily on hadith, but that was not very effective school with those people, because you're facing people that are questioning your Quran, and they're not going to listen to you very much when you talk hadith. So what are they going to listen to? What is the tool that you're going to use to try to counteract those arguments? Well, then you're going to use the only tool that you have in common with them, which is the human mind. That's the only tool you have that is in common with them that you can carry out the conversation. So some groups started to use more and more of the human mind, more and more of logic, reason, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, human exercise, human effort into bringing out the true meaning of the text to argue those troublemakers. And one particular group of people that relied heavily on the mind, of course they did not detach from Quran, but they relied heavily on the mind, is al-Mu'tazila. And this is how they started. They started as a reaction to the criticism Muslims received by non-Muslims, non-Arab Muslims that were criticizing the ideology or some verses in the Quran in relation to our ideology, ليس كمثله شيء. And they were very successful, Mu'tazila. They were very successful in those counter arguments. And eventually they, pretty much defeated everybody, all the us. They had the state on their side, so that kind of helped. But this is what happens. An entire school of thought developed. And when they were done fighting with the Jews and the Hindus and the philosophers and all these other ethnicities on the periphery of the state, when they were done, and they were very much on good terms with the ruling class, because the ruling class, obviously, like the khulafa and whatnot, they like to utilize them because those troublemakers, when they were doing those, when they're stirring up that trouble, they weren't stirring up that trouble for the sake of intellectual argument. I mean, at the end of the day, there's always an ulterior motive, and it was political. They're subdued, they're trying to counteract that, but how are they going to attack Islam? They start attacking Quran from that angle. So when Mu'tazila came and fought that battle, they were very much at the pleasure of the governance of the Muslim world. So they were on good terms with the Khulafa. But they weren't winning. This is the key point. When they were done with that battle and they came back, what did they find? What did they find in the Muslim world? They found a Muslim world that is literally flooding with ahadith. So they took, and that school of thought developed. I mean, you're talking people that spend their entire lives, sometimes even generations of people that spend their entire life heavily mind al-Quran. Mind al-Quran. That was basically what their life was about. And they became adversarial to the common folk within the Muslim world. So when they finished that battle outside, they started another battle inside. And the state was on their side. And this is the beginning of the fitna that people say, fitna khalq al-Quran. The technicality of what the word khalq al-Quran, how it came about, is of no importance. But just for the sake of argument, I think it started with the fact that they were trying to defend. So the Mu'tazila says that the Quran was created. The Ahl al-Hadith, which later became the majority, like right now the majority of the Muslim world, stems from that sect or that category or school, let's say, that was in opposition to a Mu'tazila. And it was something about a verse in the Quran that talks about Prophet Isa, alayhi salam, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَلِمَتُهُ أَلْقَاهَا إِلَى مَرْيَمَ. One verse of the Quran says, وَكَلِمَتُهُ أَلْقَاهَا إِلَى مَرْيَمَ. It's his word that he bestowed on Mary. Mu'tazila saw the problem with that verse. It says, وَكَلِمَتُهُ أَلْقَاهَا إِلَى مَرْيَمَ. If we're going to say that his words are eternal, like what Ahl al-Hadith are saying, then can his word to Maryam also be eternal? And if his word to Maryam is eternal, that sort of resonates with Christian ideology. So they saw a very problematic thing with that. So they said, no, Quran is not eternal, Quran is created. His word is created. So they wouldn't have a problem with the fact that the word to Maryam was created. I think the technicality started that way. But at the heart of it, it was not about this, it was about the conflict. A school of thought fighting another school of thought, and politics was involved. So the Mu'tazila were more sort of in line with the elites, political elites, and the Al-Hadith were more in line with the common people. Eventually, at a great cost, the the khulafa, they don't like popular people in the population because they could pose a political threat down the road. Like if someone is really popular, thousands and thousands of people like him, like some of the scholars of the Hadith, that was an uncomfortable situation because they could potentially become competition. And that's how revolution starts. It starts with people around some person, and even though if their message is non-political, it could turn political at some point. So they basically used the Mu'tazila, Khulafa used Mu'tazila to boom, fight that fight, like you fought with those on the outside, let's crush these people on the inside. And they fought this battle, and they lost. And when they lost, the Khalifa that came after, so the two Khalifa that sort of got involved with this are Al-Ma'mun and Mu'tasim. And they're both sons of Harun al-Rashid. The Khalifa that came after Al-Mutawakkil, he sort of picked up on the trend. He picked up that these people were losing, Mu'tazila were losing the battle. So he flipped with people of Ahl al-Hadith. He flipped with the majority on the ground. And of course he is declared in the literature of Ahl al-Hadith as the triumph and the Khalifa who supported the Sunnah, Nasir al-Sunnah, triumph of the Sunnah, while in fact on a personal level he was a scandalous person. He was not a good person, and there's reports of that. But because he sort of flipped, and that was basically the beginning of the end for the Mu'tazila. They did not have popular support, and now they lost the support of the state. And eventually they would disintegrate and completely get forgotten as a organized school. Now they do, because they relied on the concept of using your mind a lot, and I'm just saying this from a descriptive standpoint, I'm not praising or criticizing. Because they relied on it, this same reason, the same concept, the same gravitation toward using the human mind a little more than the other guys, the Ahl al-Hadith, that persists. So you would find people that are quote-unquote Mu'tazila-like throughout Islamic history, even to this day. But as a category of people, as a school, it basically evaporated. But at that time when it evaporated, this is why I say you have to understand also the story of Hadith cannot be understood without so many aspects to it. One of them is this conflict, and that was a major conflict. What do you think happened after that? Ahl Hadith had absolutely no competition. Boom, they became Islam. Islam became Ahl Hadith, and Ahl Hadith became Islam. So the output of that battle, or the result of that conflict, had monumental impact on the paradigm. Remember, the paradigm started with the paradigm that was started with Shafi'i, when started saying no, Hadith is an independent source, and it can supersede and overpower the mind aspect of the theory of knowledge was in ijtihad. It overpowers that. Then with the time of Imam Ahmad and Khalifa al-Mutawakkil, it was sealed forever. I mean, there was no question. After that, there was no question whatsoever that is the correct route and that is correct interpretation. And ever since basically the mechanism of feedback, I mean, what we lost in that is not just the Mu'tazila. And Mu'tazila may have become a good school of thought, and maybe become a bad school of thought. Reality is, if reality is any check, there would be a mixed bag. I'm not saying there would be great. There would probably be a mixed bag. But what was lost is you always have, when you are in conflict with your opposite, you always have that feedback that protects you from your own excessiveness. When your mortal enemy, so to speak, is dead, and you don't have that feedback, there's no check on your excessiveness after that. And then sort of the Ummah spiraled into taqleed, beginning into taqleed. Obviously it was a gradual process, but that's how it ended. So This is the chronology of the ideological conflict.
And in that regard, the other madahib,
They all stemmed from Ahl al-Hadith.
And then
or they were overpowered, I should say.
Not stemmed.
Now you could make a claim that Shafi'i was very much from Ahl al-Hadith.
Sure.
You could make that claim. And of course Ahmad, which is at the heart of that conflict, was very much in line with Shafi'i and even more to the point than Shafi'i.
Yeah.
But when Ahl al-Hadith basically triumphant and they killed the other side, which is Mu'tazila, the other two schools of fiqh were overpowered epistemologically by Ahl al-Hadith.
And then you had scholars from each that had influences into Ahl al-Hadith, and so basically what I'm trying to understand is you said the early days of the madhab were like this, and then no longer. So then they got kind of overrun.
Oh yeah.
By that, and so even their own scholars then.
Oh yeah.
Became.
Their own scholars, because you have to understand, Malik and Abi Hanifa are a generation behind the Shafi'i. Ahmad and the whole conflict with Mu'tazila is a generation after Shafi'i. So now you have two generation difference. Mm-hmm. So the students of those two schools were very much in the same environment as Ahmad and that conflict. And they were part of the conflict. They were people from Ahl al-Hadith. Mm-hmm. I mean, the process was happening gradually, but any hope of keeping that in check was lost. So this is the story this is the epistemology and the chronology of the paradigm. Basically, if you want to put it in a nutshell, it was overrun by a hadith. So hadith, this is what I mean by hadith, went from 0 to 100 in about 300 years. Mm-hmm. The role of ijtihad became less and less and less and less with time, and there is even a definition of what ijtihad became after that. Ijtihad is ijtihad within the school. Like, you can't go outside the epistemology of the school. And we're talking epistemology of the school at its later stages, not its early stages. So you could do ijtihad within the school. And then people that came after, they would do even less ijtihad than the people before. And you get to the point, you get to like the common era or the modern era where people are literally like completely encircled with their own taqleed. No, I mean, it's just a deep freeze. The whole thing went into a deep freeze. That's why we're always reactionary right now. We are not the Muslims of the second and third century. At least those people had some room to use their, think and use their mind. So that's the chronology, and that's how the paradigm came. Quran first, in principle, Quran and Hadith together in practice. Sometimes even Hadith is more, and with time, very, very, very little ijtihad happens after that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so last question then.
Yeah.
The verse in the Quran that talks about like understanding the deen by understanding the Quran and the Sunnah. What is the verse?
Understanding the deen by understanding. I mean, there's a verse that says that the Prophet is our role model.
No.
لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ.
Right, but that's not what I'm talking about. Isn't there is a verse? I can find it, but there is a verse that talks about.
There's another verse that says وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الذِّكْرَ لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهِمْ. And people say that the word dhikr here means the sunnah. وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ, if you want to install the meanings the way they want to understand it. وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ السُّنَّةِ لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهِمْ أي القرآن. I mean, some people understand this in that context.
There's no verse in the Quran that has the word sunnah in it at all. It's never in the Quran.
Anytime there is the word sunnah, but anytime you read the word sunnah in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says sunnatullah, the sunnah of Allah, not the sunnah of the Prophet. Sunnah of Allah. But let's just theoretically, for the sake of argument, say that of course, I mean, the Prophet is there to teach us, and he did teach us. But remember, the word sunnah and the word hadith were distinguished for the first 200 years.
Absolutely.
And hadith was suppressed.
Right.
until about 100 years later. But let's just say for the sake of argument that this distinction between Sunnah and Hadith is not there. And let's just say for the sake of argument that suppression for 100 years was not there. We're still stuck with the same argument. How do I know, how did these people of the 2nd and 3rd century put down those criteria for purification? Did they put down criteria based on revelation? Or did they put down criteria based on common sense and judgment? And if they put down those criteria based on common sense and judgment, why am I being forbidden from building on their work and completing their work? You see what I mean? Not to say that, and there's this other concept is, even though they put down the criteria, the actual application of those criteria on every single hadith is variable effort. It's, at the end of the day, it's a human effort. So the criteria is human effort. They're all approximations. I mean, remember what I said about it's an opinion, whether this guy was good or not, at the end of the day, it's another man's opinion about another man. Whether they actually met or not relies on the testimony. Whether they, a Sahabi narrated hadith by listening from another Sahabi, but he didn't mention it, is also an approximation. That is an issue because we have a lot of hadiths from Sigar al-Sahaba. We have a lot of hadiths from young Sahaba. So if the hadiths from young Sahaba, chances are a significant portion of what they heard is not from the Prophet directly, but from another Sahabi. But they didn't say that. So who's this other Sahabi? You know, but to get out of that problem, it's an epistemological problem. Because if you don't know the narrator, the hadith should be cancelled. Unless the narrator is a Sahabi. So how do you get out of that problem? Okay, the entire population that was alive at that time is beyond question in terms of integrity. But nobody again talks about Dabt, you know, because how they understood, they also differed among themselves with the understanding. And Aisha used to say that in public, that this person misunderstood, that person misunderstood, and so forth. So the whole issue, even if we don't talk about the fact that there is difference between Sunnah and Hadith, and even if we don't talk about the fact that it was suppressed the first 100 years, there's a whole issue of the criteria that was put down. Is why is it above? Why is it like considered a complete work? Why? I mean, based on what are we considered that work is done? Why can't I add to it? And I'm not adding to it just because I want to entertain and I'm bored. I want to add to it because I know for a fact there's category of hadiths that are the product of that epistemologic choice, i.e. Mustalah 1.0, the product of that Mustalah 1.0. I know for a fact there are hadiths that are wrong. I mean, I know, especially the ones about medicine and about natural world and whatnot. So it's not like I'm saying we should have Mustalah 2.0 without a justification. No, there is very strong justification. So the whole thing at the end of the day, just like I told you in the beginning, the whole thing about paradigm, if you dig deep down to its roots, it's about choices. How you build your paradigm, being divine component and a human component, how you build that human component at its core, it boils down to choices. So because it boils down to choices, if I have a paradigm that doesn't work, maybe I should reevaluate my choices to build a better paradigm that works. It's as simple as that. Any other questions?
We will do the afterthought. I will find the verse that I'm talking about.